All right, let's jump into things. Where are we at 10:48 on 27th of June. So pretty much at the tail end of the month here. I think we have Monday as well for last trading day of the month. But obviously starting to push into those end of month potential flows. So we'll see how that sort of plays out. Data over yesterday, last night, not really anything through Asia to sort of report on. We did have a bit of data out from the US, and obviously GDP looking to have sort of dropped down here. But the employment claims is kind of what unemployment claims here. So is what I'm kind of sort of looking at a little bit more because it seems to be what Powell keeps referencing. Like, because he's like, okay, look, two things, obviously, with their sort of dual mandate kind of thing is, inflation down. And given a bunch of the data, and this is the argument from a couple of the other Fed members that, where the data's at now, um, that warrants a cut. And that's partly the reason that you've been seeing weakness sort of through US dollar the last week, particularly when that Bowman girl was sort of like mentioning it the other day. The market really started to take a whack. Obviously, the latest sort of real sell down has come from Trump's comments about sort of potentially upping the rate of when he announces or when they announce the, I assume it's him, I'd have to look into that, but that seems to be the consensus that he'll appoint somebody to sort of replace Powell. So Powell's there till May next year. Um, but they were sort of saying as soon as sort of like, September, October this year, which of course is only a couple of months away, that he'd sort of be naming his successor. And I think the fear with this is that would be sort of like a shadow sort of Fed, basically. And obviously, sort of Trump wants cut rates, weaker dollar. Who, if he's the person that's going to appoint it, well, they're obviously going to be a puppeteer of his, or a puppet. He'd be the puppeteer, I suppose. They'd be the puppet. They're going to be a dovish sort of person. And this is why the market has just been absolutely puking US dollar. And it's just, yes, interesting. But look, we'll get to that in a moment. But the point is at the moment, look, this is actually the first month in a while. It's been creeping up a little bit. If we look at the previous months, it was in this sort of like 20s band for a while. It snuck up to the 40s. And as you can see, it's been hovering around here. And what Powell's sort of talking about is that, yes, looking previous, like at the data that's come out now, yes, that on that basis, it would warrant a cut. But he's sort of expecting, or sort of saying that he's expecting inflation to come through over the next couple of months. So obviously, if he's sort of forward thinking, so the difference between the Fed members and what Powell's saying at the moment is they're saying, hey, look, look at the data we've had, that we should cut off that basis. Powell's saying, hold on, wait, but yeah, I'm foreseeing inflation coming through. So you obviously don't want to cut, which would then exacerbate the inflation issue. Though, on the other hand of this, because it's the dual mandate, the idea is to obviously protect the economy and the jobs. And if we see this number here, these unemployment claims rising, and we see NFP and JOLTS dropping, so job openings and actual employment dropping, well, that sort of is the other side of the equation from the inflation story. And so the fact that this has actually come down is, I mean, it's you don't really see it in the chart because obviously US dollar has just been overshadowed by, that whole sort of Trump situation. But it's at the moment, it's not yet another reason to puke it down a little bit lower, if that makes sense. It's not sort of like, it's obviously hasn't shown it any sort of reprieve, but these kind of numbers here, durable goods orders, that's beaten expectations and quite a substantial jump up. I mean, even the sort of, the core has beaten the expectations quite significantly there as well. So, you're getting some sort of positive data. So it shows that basically the economy isn't sort of completely tanking. Inflation is actually sort of probably, I think it's on its way down. And I think, look, we just actually had, Tokyo CPI out. That's come in lower than expected. We had Aussie CPI come in lower than expected. So the world's theme kind of sort of seems to be that, inflation's not really so much of an issue anymore. So, this is why this is, I think, a bit more important to be paying attention to at the moment because, while sort of Powell's saying, hey, look, he expects inflation to come up, the world sort of consensus at the moment, I know not every economy is the same, they deal with their own bits and pieces, is that it is coming obviously substantially down. So if they can sort of keep the jobs in check, that eliminates yet another reason for a cut. So if the inflation is coming down, that's a reason for a cut. It may spike up, as he sort of said, or he's predicting. But at the same time, you've got to take into account both sides of the coin, and the other one is the employment claim. So, this is interesting sort of data sort of coming out here. And look, I mean, certainly not not really helping US dollar at all. But as I said, it's kind of like, okay, well, it's not yet another nail in the coffin, so to speak, with it all. So moving forward, trade balance. Okay, so this is a little bit negative on the numbers here as well. So it was a big whack of data that sort of came out there last night. But as I said, I'm just having a quick look on the chart, how it actually responded at the time, and I don't think it really did anything for it. I mean, it's just finding itself a little base, and that's about it. Um, moving forward, so yeah, as I said this morning, we had sort of a bit of BOJ, Japanese data sort of coming out. That's sort of coming down here. Retail sales, sort of year on year, a bit of a miss down there as well. So they were expecting a bit of a sort of drop down, and obviously it's coming a little bit lower there. And so we've seen yen weaken a little bit off that, which I think has probably helped sort of stabilize, DXY a little bit. But as I said, it's very much in a very precarious sort of position, which I'll get to on the chart in a moment. Through rest of Asia, nada, not really anything to sort of report there. And as I said, tonight, I think the main thing here is just this core PCE. And I think this is the one that people are looking for as well, because as I said before, everybody's sort of looking back at the moment and sort of going, okay, well, given the data that's there, we should be cutting. Well, I mean, this is another one that you're going to sort of plug in here. And they say that this is the main one that the Fed looks at. CPI obviously sort of seems to garner a lot of the attention, but apparently this is look, it's a Federal's primary inflation measure. So this will be an important one. And the thing is, again, if it comes in low, well, that's showing that there's the inflation's low. So that's one side of the coin that's not in the whole sort of cut sort of thing. Sorry, that is in the cut sort of side of camp of that. If this number pushes up, well, then, you've got a conversation to be had because, Powell's sort of saying that. So it's a really sort of sticky situation at the moment. And I think it's just, again, it's all this complete uncertainty, which is just showing absolute zero faith in the US dollar. I mean, markets have just been absolutely ripping. I mean, we've got all-time highs on, NASDAQ and S&P and all these kind of things. So, I mean, ASX I think last week was it? Yeah, already put in its all-time high and, it's bouncing back along here. So I think it's almost sort of safe to say that April was just one incredibly big shakeout because I know a lot of people would have been looking, and myself included, looking for that second push back down and it just never came. It just never came on a lot of these things. So it's pretty much safe to say that was just a complete big sort of shakeout. All right, so in that, let's jump onto the chart. Um, so Rio's having a good morning here, so I'll cover that in a separate video later, and jump onto DXY. So DXY cleaned up chart. when all else fails, just clean up the chart because obviously something is sort of missing here. So look, this is one thing that I did sort of find, well, sort of having a quick look around with a cleaned up sort of chart here. We do have this sort of long-term sort of falling resistance here. Now, these sort of things, it's kind of more like just an interesting fact of where it sort of finds support. But, it is seeming to hold along here. This level that we did sort of get a little bit of a bounce from this 97, was it 97.30 or so. This kind of area that we had marked out, if you remember, this is like from way back over here. Again, it's not like a massive level, but it is something that is sort of, put on there because it is something that will show some sort of level of significance. And as you can see, a short-term bottom for it all. It doesn't mean that that's the bottom of all bottoms, but it was an area that I was sort of looking at for a downside. And as you can see, it's managed to sort of push around and sort of holding around here at the time being. If we get onto a lower time frame, something we can actually use, it does look like a little wedge is also sort of forming through here. And we've sort of, as I said, we've found a little bit of a sort of short-term base. It's starting to sort of consolidate and potentially looking to try and sort of poke its head out here. Now, you got to keep in mind that this is just a 4 hour incredible downtrend here. And obviously, a second ago, I showed this sort of like, you got the daily working against you as well. So, it's not like, okay, you got a little wedge down here. This is the bottom of all bottoms. But it does mean that there is a chance for a little bit of reprieve. With any sort of little push up here, first sort of targets are just these gaps that we sort of left the last couple of sessions through this week. I'd imagine should we get any sort of push up here, we're just going to get some selling coming back in here because you got a big tidal wave of selling pushing this thing down. Anybody that was trying to sort of hold these levels, if they get a chance to get out, they're going to take it. And this is the thing we saw yesterday that sort of like, or let's say last couple of days, the bouncers weren't even able to close the gaps because sellers are like, hey, look, any single chance that I have to come in here, I'm going to take it. And as you can see, like, this little low just here, this little wick from, basically this last sort of down period we had, which is just across here. This is where they took the chance to do it straight away. Bottom of that wick, first chance, bang, okay, I'm out. Didn't even get a chance to close that gap. So look, gaps I still think are a little bit of a magnet. I do think we could see a potential little bit of a push up through here. I mean, it doesn't mean, as I keep saying, it doesn't mean that sort of like we're going to the tops. I mean, a measured move on this gives you, whoops, like that. Let's make you measured move from the break level. Hold here. Measured moves takes you back up to 98.67. 67, yeah, thereabouts. So look, I'm open to the idea that, I mean, these things can't go down forever. I mean, there'll be a level where people do take profit. There'll be a level where people go, hey, you know what? This is just a value play and shit. It's so incredibly bashed down. And you'll see a bit of a sort of bounce up. It doesn't mean that a 4-hour wedge is the bottom of all bottoms, but, and I'm not looking for a 6-month trade here. I'm looking for something that I can use intra-session and that. So we'll see how we go with it all. But at the moment, look, it's poking its nose out the top of this over here. See what happens when it gets up to this gap. See what happens. I imagine a little bit of a pushback, but a second push through here will make things quite interesting. So if we get up to the gap, expect some people to sort of sell it down, that's fine. If we can put a second effort in and actually push up and say, push up above, say 97, give it a good sort of bid here, 97.80, 97.90, then I think you could be going on. And then again, the second thing you're looking for is this gap down over here. So we'll see if we can sort of close that gap as well. And then obviously measured move if you did sort of get there. But it's one of those things. It's sort of like, every day you're like, it's going to go here, got to go here. After a while, it's sort of like, you're like, am I just crazy by sort of trying to pick this thing here or trade this thing? But anyway, look, it's got a wedge. It's breaking there. These are the kind of levels that I'm looking for with it. Gold playing a little bit better. So which chart? This is the one that we're on here. So this is the little sort of bear flag, which is proving to be a little bit of a pain, like, to be honest. So let's actually put a little support in here because you can see that, it's pushed down here. This is fine because the main sort of plan with this trade was obviously shorting from the top side over here. So, it's come down very well. It's back tested the wedge. It's broken down. We found buyers exactly where we thought it would, like in this little zone down here, pushed up. That's fine. It's exactly how we sort of thought it would happen. This is the leg that we're in now. This one coming down here. So this is the one. If their sellers are going to really sort of make use of this, you need to get down. And really, as you can see, it's set up itself a little support here. So this previous body fill at sort of 3,310, 33.10, that's the kind of level you want to see break. Yeah, you're going to see some sort of reaction probably around this 32.80, but I think this is the more important one just for the time being because this sort of solidifies the idea that we're going up, bounce, and now we go down here again. It doesn't mean that you necessarily get this play out, but in saying that, I'm still happy with that sort of price target for the next move down to look to see some buying come in around here. And then maybe a retest of these levels down over here. And this also comes in pretty close with this bottom wick that we had sort of back in, where's this one, sort of end of May. So look, it's obviously it's trying to hold a little support here. It did find resistance pretty much exactly where we sort of thought it would be, like a couple of bucks over, that's fine. But the general idea is obviously, support, support. It's obviously proved to be itself a little resistance. I think a close outside one of these two levels is what's going to give us our direction. So down here, or should it want to sort of rally back up? Well, I mean, you could always sort of push it back up over here as well. But as I said, I'm leaning more to this structure breaking down to the downside. And I think, look, if US dollar, like, you got to think as well, like, typically these guys have an inverse relationship, US dollar and gold. And, they've been selling down US dollar, obviously, smashing it. But gold has not been catching a bid. So, what happens if they're already selling gold even while they're selling US dollar? What happens when they start to buy US dollar? You know what I mean? That's just going to be another whack on gold, pretty much. So we'll see how we go. I mean, look, you got a plan for both of them. I think a close above 46, a close below 306. These kind of levels here will give you a direction, but I'm leaning for the downside. Yeah. All right. Tick along. We got Aussie. Oh, geez, the bane of my existence, man. This trade, unbelievable. Like the bounce recovery of this thing. I've been shorting it from up over this area here. Where's the other chart that I've been using? Excuse me. Look at this. Just lines all over the place and none of it's working. So basically we had this big sort of triangle. That's fine. We got the break. We got the back test. We got the bone push down to the lower here. This little weekly zone here provided an incredible launch pad and then a move back up here. So it's now taken out all these highs, all these pushes up over here. It's finding a little bit of resistance up over here. As I said, in time while you're seeing maybe a little bit of a reprieve on the US dollar. I'm not really sort of too sure what to do with this here at the moment. I had been on the short side for a lot of it. I still think we do have downside because if you look at sort of where US dollar is, so US dollar is against the majors, it's collectively DXY at 3.5 year lows. You know what I mean? Like, so you look at sort of euro that makes up 60% or so of 60% or so of DXY. It's pushing its highs at like 117. I think 117, 117.50 or something like this. It's mammothly sort of breaking these new highs, doing all this kind of stuff. It makes up a lot of it. That's fine. But in comparison of what they're doing with that to what they're doing with the Aussie dollar is not anywhere near multi-year highs. Even though they're selling US dollar broadly against the rest of the market to 3.5 year lows collectively, Aussie dollar is still only at 61% of its drop down from September last year. That's including April's drop off down here, which, as I said, I think is an orchestrated, with my little silver tinfoil hat, sort of orchestrated sort of situation, whatever. Anyway, point is that collectively, it's 3.5 year highs. Aussie's only at 61%. They're not buying Aussie because it's a great value play. I don't believe. I think they're just buying Aussie because they're selling US dollar, and they're selling US dollar against absolutely everything. So it doesn't make Aussie any sort of special sort of thing here at the moment. But the thing is, it is sort of, let's get on to something a little bit lower. It is sort of obviously breaking out of this. It bounced up, consolidated for 2 days, broke up higher, tested out the highs here. So this is a vital sort of point for it. It needs to sort of like really push up and really solidify this move above the 61% because it's up, taken out the highs here now. If this breaks back down below, say, even sort of 40s just to begin with, but realistically, you need to get it back down towards 65. If you fail again, remember it did 7 weeks testing up above 65. This has put in a new high here, and it hasn't. None of these highs have really exploded. So each time you go above these highs, you expect some like sort of explosion at the top because in theory, there's a bunch of stops sitting there, which then people go, oh, no, it's going much higher, it's going much higher. So if it goes here, well, I'm out, and you get that explosive move. It just, each time it's putting these highs, putting these highs, putting these highs, and it's just hasn't seen the big explosive move to the top side. It's just kind of grinded up, and sort of, Line this down a little bit. Um, quite, sorry, lost my train of thought here. It's sort of grind it up, and it's just, here it is. It's put in new highs, and it's kind of dribbled back a little bit. So I think PCE is going to be very important for tonight. I think sort of if we see a continued sell-off on US dollar, I think that's going to be the key for Aussie to get up around these sort of 66 levels, 66.50, whatever. But at the moment, it's poked its head out the top and not really anything. It sort of got sold back down into. So it's in that sort of little second drive at the moment. Like, you sort of move up here, you pull back. You see what I mean? It needs to get this next leg here because at the moment it's in danger of doing this, which is a lower low, and which, it doesn't mean that, okay, it's coming back down here. Again, these are just sort of intraday trades and intraday setups, but it does show that there is obviously, if there's a lower high, it shows a failed interest in buying pressure to push this thing all the way through, obviously, because the price gets lower. So then the emphasis goes back on its low point here, which is 43 or 40 or so, and then potentially coming back down over there as well. So I think this is the moment that it really needs to show that it wants to go higher. I think otherwise, sort of like you're really in danger of sort of just dribbling back down to low 65s or so. Look, there's a bunch of levels of support through here. Yesterday's move just found buyers continuously, obviously pushing up through these zones here. But, you do have this like little sort of rising support, which actually sort of, if you take it from the bottom down here, it just grinded up the side of this thing the whole day. Get rid of these now. And it has sort of broken through. So, not that it's a sort of like make or break kind of thing, but it's something worth noting that, it was holding it, holding it, holding it. This is in back test of the underside of this rising support. I think if you take out sort of 42, you're going to see a dribble back down to, low 65s. That's probably your first target here. I mean, the flip side is this flips this candle here right now, this 1 hour, and we see this thing charge through. And as I said, take out, 65, you'll see this thing move on. Just a point as well with Aussie, as I said, always as I mentioned, 60s and 90s seem to be reoccurring numbers where you always seem to find some action. So the fact that it sort of shot up here to these 60s and found some sort of resistance isn't like, oh wow, something's necessarily going on, but does seem to be a reoccurring level that garners a bit of interest on the Aussie. So if I was to sort of say for an intraday session, that's what I'm kind of looking for here. As you breakout box, cautious of the fact that it's broken through this rising support, but that can be negated by push up above 65, 65, 70, these kind of things, put in a new high, and you want to see that explosive move. You want to see like some real interest in the market to sort of take this thing higher and not just dribble up, brand new high, no stops, okay, whatever, and sell it back down. Because, with all the games that it plays, every time here it's made a new high. If you look at these things here, here was a new high, here was a new high. You know what I mean? Like it got above, new high, sold down. Got above, new high, sold down. If we look at this high here, which is this green line here, got above, actually held for a little bit longer than the other ones. Second effort, but it is starting to sort of sell down. You see, it needs to sort of really solidify this move by breaking through and seeing some explosive action. If it doesn't get a big sort of push, hence like a bunch of stops and that, I think that, you could look at this kind of thing here. You look at previously the price action. Moved up, took out the previous high, second effort. This is where we are right now, second effort. Take out the lows of that swing push back. Well, you can see the price action that comes after it. And here's the high. There's your low swing back. This is where we are right now, obviously. Take out these lows, you can expect a little bit of a dribble back down as well. Unless you get that explosive move to the top side, I think it's back down towards 65s. And this is why PCE is going to be very important tonight, because Aussie has done 7 weeks. This is the 8th week that it's actually tested above 65. It needs to solidify this and actually close above 65, because, you know what I mean? How many weeks can it get up here? Take out the highs, take out the highs, take out the highs, and keep failing. If we do see some miraculous turnaround US dollar, I think it's going to be susceptible. I've been saying this endlessly, but that is still my belief. Till you see some real sort of commitment. I mean, you've got equity markets punching to the highs. You've got copper absolutely, which I'll cover in a second, like punching to the highs. These are the kind of things that Aussie should be a lot higher than it is right now. And these are the pillars that hold up Aussie, because it's a risk-on asset. And why are people buying copper? Because they're manufacturing more because they're manufacturing metal. Well, that's kind of risk-on. Why are equities high? Well, equities probably high because US dollar's so weak, and obviously metals are coming off a little bit as well. But they've got to put the capital somewhere. They go into the equity markets, but still, that's a risk-on kind of attitude towards things. Even though they were sort of like bombing, we were on the verge of a sort of all-out sort of war. People were still buying equities, yet Aussie still can't get over 65. I think that's, what I mean. They're the pillars holding it up. If those things turn, I think Aussie will be susceptible. But we'll see how we go. I mean, it's the recovery here has just been incredible. So yeah, we'll see how we go. It's a bit tough to sort of get against these things. Bet against these things sometimes. All right, so let's jump on. We've got silver. So silver is sort of more or less sort of playing the game. I haven't actually traded silver for a while. Ever since this big sort of push up from over these zones over here, I kind of let it do its thing. This was the kind of course of action. I expected this to come a little bit closer to this rising support, but the general idea of push down, push back up, this is why I'm sort of a little bit cautious on silver a little bit here at the moment. It's a bit of a wonky sort of thing to call it a head and shoulders, but this is kind of a bit of it all. So again, this rising support I think is going to be crucial once that's sort of tested and seen if the buyers are going to hold this thing and rocket it up towards sort of 38 or so. But I would be surprised in that. Yeah, actually, no, I wouldn't be surprised. Everything seems to be pumping at the moment. But as I said, look, I still think that this is due a touch up. So whether it be sort of this thing now, yeah, we'll see how we go. But yeah, as I said, I've kind of put silver on the sidelines for that. Sort of missed this move up here, and I haven't wanted to buy it, and I've been too cautious to short it. Particularly sort of with US dollar being such a sort of weak sort of bit at the moment. Flow along, we've got copper. So copper went right out here. As you can see, this was a big move yesterday, and it really sort of like was coming up here. And just this is a capitulation kind of thing, but the difference this time is it's held. So if we have a look at a couple of these other moves where we went back here, so this was a big move here. We saw, obviously, but this has got a big wick. So it found sellers straight away. This is all-time high. This is 2.7%. It did this in, I think these are 30-minute candles. Yeah, so this 30-minute candle went 2.7%. Last night, on 30 minutes, you could see, well, maybe it ticked over here. It's actually just ticked into the new 30-minute candle here. 2%, basically, in 35 minutes or something it did it. But the difference this time is it's held. So it's found resistance, like spot on where we sort of thought the sellers would be. But it hasn't given it up yet. And this is the thing that, is making me sort of think like, if this thing breaks higher, I think that could be something that sort of bolsters Aussie to go a bit higher as well. But yeah, we'll see how we go with it all. But look, it's found resistance kind of, well, exactly where we kind of marked it. Again, it's just been something that I've sort of sat on. I was, again, looking for the downsides here. So, it shows a lot of these things. I've been looking for downsides, and endlessly, look, honestly, wrong with these things here. But I sort of cover myself by sort of at least sort of standing on the sidelines a little bit more often. As to where to from here, look, it's consolidating. It is finding a couple of efforts. That's what's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5 efforts here. These are first. So it's about 20 hours that it's been pushing at this level here. It's overbought. This is on the 4-hour. This last candle doesn't look particularly encouraging. And it looks like it may sort of want to pull back over here. So maybe some pullbacks down to around the sort of 505 number and see if the buyers want to step in early here. That's a previous sort of level that we had marked out. I think this is the gap level. Yeah, so this is where gap body fill would be. So I would say some short-term downside here, but I imagine this to at least have another run back up to test this 511, 512 level. So whether it sort of comes back down to, 497, 498, whatever, these kind of levels down over here, I imagine there to be another run. I don't think this is like the top here, because the difference between this one here and when we had this big top over here, or even this level where it sort of spiked up and closed that gap, is, this thing's sold down. This time it's consolidating around the highs, which shows that people are sort of not so keen to automatically just jump on the profit taking. So I think any sort of dip down here is going to be something that's worth a buy up in that kind of position. And finally, just with USD China, it is dribbling, moving down. Sort of got close to where we were sort of looking at for sort of supports. But as you can see, it's really just slowly grinding down over here. It's not really a great deal to sort of report with this thing. I keep sort of, again, look, I keep calling these things and they're looking for sort of turnarounds. I think I need to address that. But these sort of moves down here at the moment you're seeing, it's sort of obviously it's just dribbling. I mean, this is just what this currency does, this pair does. Like, it's not a big move. When it does move, it'll sort of shift a level or two, but then it'll just grind. So yeah, we're seeing this thing slowly dribble out to the bottom side over here. Really, it's got to get, if you're going to see any upside above 718, I think that's going to be any sort of reprieve. I'm call that the bounce level. Before that, till that, I'm not really interested in it, to be honest. Where we at here? Bit of a move down here. So, I mean, you can see it's a little bit of a negative divergence through here. But as I said, till you get back up into minimum this range, I'm not really interested in it. Basically use it as a barometer anyway. But as you can see, the further this dribbles down, if this pushes up to the top side here, I think that we're going to see, as I said, I think that's going to be putting a bit of pressure on Aussie and putting a bit of pressure on, yet a little bit more pressure on gold as well. All right, that's it from me.